Hi there, welcome back to Mysteries Channel. Today I'm going to go over some stuff that I didn't get to in my last video, and it kind of ties back 2 videos ago, and that would be the Adapa video and the Mystery Schools video. The question that I didn't get to at the very end of my last video was, are they connected to Masonic orders or secret societies, and if so, how? Now, I just want to bring up a comment someone brought up, or somebody asked on my Adapa video. Layla brought up that she thought it was accepted knowledge that Adapa was the biblical figure of Adam. In all honesty, while researching Adapa, I went solely off the tablets found, which were few and far between and also pretty fragmented at that. But I did find a paper that goes over it, and I'm going to link that in the description box below. For me, it's not a smoking gun, so I just don't know for sure. But it could be, I just don't know. But a lot of people do believe it. Also, in my Adapa video, I said that Adapa was a little bit obscure, except in certain circles, right? Adapa is a sage that represents a class of people called the Ashapu. The Ashapu were those with the broad understanding and knowledge of Enki. Adapa is also named as the one who perfectly designs the universe. Just want to pause there and call attention to the fact that he designed but did not create it, because this is something that I kind of got hung up on for a second, because I was like, just what? You know? Designed but did not create. An architect, if you will. I also want to go over the Ashapu and the AKALU. We already stated that the Ashapu were those with the broad understanding of Enki, practitioners of his teachings. Priests that acted as physicians, performed exorcisms and rituals for many different aspects of everyday life, as well as for milestones, and they seem to have practiced a sort of magic. Or, if not magic, it seemed like magic to those without broad understanding of Enki. At the time, the ideas of science, religion, and witchcraft were very closely intertwined and formed the basis of Ashapu. Ashapu was the practice used by the Ashapu to combat sorcery, perhaps in their exorcisms, and to heal disease. The Ashapu studied omens and symptoms to formulate an assumption of the future for a subject and then performed rituals in an attempt to change it to a more favorable fate. Ashapu acted as advisors on risky, uncertain, and difficult decisions. Ashapu was unusual for that time period because the Ashapu did not claim to foresee the future but approached the construction of advice through repeatable, consistent processes, identifying important dimensions to the problems, considering alternatives to the problems, basically collecting all the data they could concerning a certain situation. The practice that they used then is not that dissimilar from hazards and risk management, what insurance companies and large corporations do today, where they collect all the data and try to come up with a presumption of what may happen in the future and then formulate a favorable solution based on the data collected, if that makes any sense. Basically, they collected data and they stacked the cards in their favor. Look at it that way. The AKALU. The term AKALU, sometimes it was Abgal, was a term that was used for kings and gods as a person of marked wisdom, knowledge, or broad understanding. Adapa was a man that had that knowledge and understanding, a priest, not a king, not a person of royal lineage, not a god. He was an Ashapu. A king or a royal person or a god would be the AKALU. Remember when I said earlier that this knowledge was taught in mystery schools by royalty, and AKALU is likely a person of royal lineage with broad understanding. Many times when people are talking about the AKALU, they depict them as the birdmen, but this is incorrect. The AKALU are also depicted as fishmen in ancient Sumerian texts. They are referenced in many ancient works. They are like a higher class of Ashapu, kinda. In the poem of Era, it says, I made those AKALUs go down to the Absu, and I said they were not to come back up. That is tablet 1, line 147. Then in tablet 2, 1, line 62, they were mentioned again, and it says, where are the 7 AKALU of the Absu? The holy carp, those who are perfect in lofty wisdom, like Ea their Lord, who make my body holy. So much like the Ashapu, 7 is a holy number. There are 7 AKALU, there are 7 Ashapu. Because of this whole Birdman thing, there are probably depictions of them show up more than the fishmen do. I was kind of stuck and I wanted to see who the heck is this? And I think this is, if the Ashapu and the AKALU were maybe the first people of science with spiritualism nonetheless, like alchemists, if you will, then the birdmen, these guys were the fortune tellers. After reading a lot of abstracts and different texts and papyrus, I believe the birdmen were the diviners. What you say? That's what I was like too, but in ancient Mesopotamia, birds were normally used as a means to tell the future. Predictions could be made two different ways, either by observing their flights and behaviors or their physical peculiarities prior to and after their sacrifice. Divinations often look like this. If a man goes off on an errand and a falcon crosses from the right of the man to the left of the man, he will attain his desire. If a man is about to sacrifice to his god and a falcon crosses from the right of the man to the left of the man, that man, his god, has accepted his sacrifice. It's almost like two factions are at work here. And it's funny because we confuse them as one today, but these were very separate entities. The diviners and the Ashapu, I don't think they mixed very well back then. I'm just saying. There's a very interesting paper by a lady named Nicola de Zorzi. I'll have it in the description box below. I'd read it. It's interesting. It's almost like the beginning of superstition with the birdmen. We also know that there is a deep connection between Adapa, the Ashapu, Enki, the Apsu, and Emmerkar. Eridu is the place that binds these guys together, but Emmerkar is not from Eridu. He is from Uruk. He's the second king to be there. His father was the first king. His father went into the sea to never return again. What ties Emmerkar to Eridu, Enki, and Adapa is that he is the one who builds the Abzu. He builds Enki's temple. Abzu, the house of the deep waters. What makes this significant is the Abzu is said to be the primordial sea below the void of space. In many ways, and in many texts, it's kind of described as an aquifer of sorts. And if Emmerkar is a king, he would be known as an AKALU, not an Ashapu, the title for those versed in the broad understanding of Enki, reserved for royalty. I think Emmerkar might be one of the most interesting men on the king's list, honestly. We know that Emmerkar and Adapa have a strange adventure in which it's described in an extremely fragmented tablet that they traveled deep into the sea and retrieved an ancient corpse from the remotest of times to perform a ritual on. We also know that Emmerkar is credited with the invention of cuneiform writing. His reign lasts about 420 years, according to Wikipedia, and they say it was around 2600 BC. And I'll forego the rant about how ridiculous this is and how the damn timeline is off, people. And I won't even do my 2-hour-long eye roll, but I will say this is super interesting. When you look at the damn king's list yourself, you will just do the math, like I did, boop, 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 and you'll realize that he is much closer to around 9000 BC than he is to 2600 BC. Why they put that date down there, it boggles my mind. Also know that he is the 33rd king on the Sumerian kings list. Interesting. We also know that his reign and rule are deeply tied to Inanna, and that Inanna is Enki's daughter. I know that sometimes people are like, no, she was Enlil's daughter, or no, she was An's daughter. But in the fertility ritual of Inanna and Dagon, it states, when standing in the heavens, she is the good wild cow of An. On earth, she instills respect. She is the lady of the lands, divine powers in the Abzu, in Eridu. Her father Enki presented them to her. He placed the lordship and the kingship in her hands. And it says, out of her heart she chooses Emmerkar. Emmerkar gains favor from Inanna because he promises to build her a temple, as amazing as the temple he built for her father Enki. Her temple will become known as the House of Heaven. It's important to understand the role the king played in this. Not just Emmerkar, but any king of that time, for a very long stretch, in fact. Not only did he design the temple and foot the bill for the temple to be built, but he would also play a very important part in the ritual of the first brick. This, back then, was called the brick of the decision of fate, and today you might know it as the cornerstone brick. A Sumerian example with the ritual associated with this I got from King Gudea. He describes how he took up the purified headpan in the mold for the brick of the decision of fate and poured luck-bringing water into the frame of the mold. While he did so, drums are beating. He smears the mold with honey and best fine quality oil. He repeats, best fine quality oil. This is important. He raises the holy hod and he goes to the mold. He takes his time to make this brick as perfect as he can make it. The entire time this is happening, incense is billowing. A ceremony and a procession is happening around him. This is a very big deal back then. And now in Freemasonry, there is also a ritual to laying a cornerstone. And here's an example I found on one of their sites. Friends and brethren, It is a custom among the fraternity of the free and accepted Masons from time immemorial to assemble for the purpose of laying of the foundation stones of certain buildings, when requested to do so by those having authority. The Grand Lodge of the Free and Accepted Masons of the state of California have been invited to lay the cornerstone of this building. We have here assembled and will now proceed with this pleasant duty. Now, among the ancients, the cornerstone of an important edifice was laid with impressive ceremonies. The symbolism of the cornerstone, when duly laid with Masonic rites in full significance, which refers to its form, is full of significance. On one of their sites, it says that it refers to its form, its situation, to its permanence, and to its consecration. As to its form, it must be perfectly square on its surface, and in its solid contents, a cube. According to them, the square is the symbol of morality, and the cube is that of truth. In its situation, it lies between the north, the place of darkness, and the east, the place of light. Hence, this position symbolizes the Masonic progress from darkness to light, and from ignorance to knowledge. The permanence and the durability of the cornerstone, which lasts long after the building in whose foundation it was placed, that has fallen into decay, is intended to remind the Freemason that when this earthly house of his tabernacle shall have passed away, he has within him a sure foundation of eternal life, a cornerstone of immortality. All these monuments that are left over now were a chance of immortality. Many ancient cultures believed in this. In ancient Greece, it is said that you died 3 deaths. The first was physical death. The second death occurred when the last person you knew in life died. The third death was the last time your name is uttered. If you want your name to be uttered for as long as possible, you're going to try to build a work that lasts forever. These massive, impressive monuments were a chance at immortality. And yes, they were places of worship and spirituality, but they were also a chance to be remembered longer than humanly possible. This is also why it was so important for royalty and the king to be involved with the making of the brick of the decision of fate. Now, you may be wondering where the tie to the square is. I believe Enki is the tie to the square. You see, the constellation that was associated with Enki was called Ashapu. Ashapu is the square of what we call Pegasus now. That's right, the square. I know this video makes it sound like I believe this started in Sumer, but I think this is much older than Sumer. I have no idea where it began, but this is the very beginning that we see it. So let's look at them a little bit. We know that they spoke a language isolate, but a number of linguists have claimed to be able to detect a substrate language of unknown classification beneath Sumerian because the name of some of the Sumer's major cities are not Sumerian, revealing influences of an earlier inhabitant. It gets even harder from here because most of their culture was wiped out through time and through people, let's be honest, right? The only reason that we know of their existence now is because archaeologists set out to prove the Bible. And this is what they found, of religion so much older. And on top of this, I just want to say, of course, I might be wrong. We may be wrong about everything. Imagine, in 10,000 years, a new civilization arises out of the ruins that occurs in our future. They come across a temple, and inside sits a monument of a giant seated on a throne. And as they excavate around this god, they find an enormous obelisk, all lined up perfectly with a freshwater pond connecting it all. Near this temple, they find priests that revered this god, holding tools of unknown origin. Just saying, that's how easy we can mess it all up. And I wonder about this all the time. I'm reading what is left behind by those who prevailed. Doesn't even mean that it's true. But this is the interesting thing about history. One thing we can say is that what happened in Sumer, happened in Egypt, happened in the Americas, happened in Asia. This world had a religion at one point in time. And I sometimes also wonder, what if the snake in the Garden of Eden symbolizes this first religion? Remember when we talked about St. Patrick pushing the snakes out of Ireland? What if the snake was a person? What if the snake was a person that held the old knowledge of an old religion? Anyway, that's what I have for today. Who knows? I should just change my channel's name from Mysteries Channel to Wild Speculation. Anyway, you guys have yourselves a very great day.